Louis, I'm happy to see you. So great to be here. I'm excited to do this once again, but there's one I've been waiting for throughout this schedule of events, if I can say that, is this one. It's said it's extra special, to say that it's extra meaningful would be a gross understatement. To anyone who's watching for the first time, this series is about. I just released this album. It's doing beyond the way that it's received is beyond my imaginations, but I'm working on the next one. And the jazz way is you go to the masters and you consult them. They mentor you. But since COVID is in and I'm not traveling anywhere, I'm not going backstage anywhere, and I cannot ask the people that I admire, respect, and love for advice about how to do this, how to do that. We figured that this would be the coolest way to go around it. So usually in these kind of situations, we invite some of the greatest producers of our time and we ask them about their work. But Mr. Sadin's work is, I mean, everybody's kind of listened to it. So without going into labels, artistic advice of Robert Sadin is I call Robert for, I think, almost but things you cannot talk about. It's the only person, the only one of only two geniuses that I've met in my life. The way that his mind work is, as you're about to see, uh, is a kind of a miracle unto itself. But so instead of asking Mr. Satan about albums, instead of asking him about this or that or this artist or that, what was it like with, instead of making this into a tabloid session, let's talk about the essence. I mean, we're in a point in history where music is the most devalued it ever been. We're in a point in history where music is probably needed the most it ever been. All of us are asking ourselves, especially if you're watching this, where is it going forward? Are we the days of the studios, are the days of the labels, are the days of the legendary producers are over? So let's talk about the essence, the reason we're all here for. Let's talk about the music. So, Mr. Sin, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Well, I'm really more than kind. Happy to hear all of that. The only thing I would say is just, I don't want to seem ungracious, but let's kind of reserve genius for Bach and Einstein and a few people. You know, if we don't, if we're, if there's, if, you know, I appreciate the thought, but, you know, we try to save that word for this. Otherwise, there's no word. What are they, super geniuses? But anyway. I'm happy and I love that introduction. And it's funny because something that used to happen often, the music business, the music field, let's say, I will come to the music business, the field of music in a professional way has been in crisis for who knows how long. I mean, when the courts broke up in Europe and you had to find a way to make a living for yourself as opposed to being hired by some prince or a duke, I'm sure everyone felt that music had collapsed and they wish they were in Bach's time where he was hired by a city or by a church and could just write music every week. And in the 1920s, when records came in, hotels stopped hiring bands to play in their lobbies. Instead, they played records. And again, people felt that this was it. This was the death knell. And so it's been a common thing. The music business is always dying, but there's a comment that I used to make a lot, and it kind of came back to me a lot recently. People would talk about, especially when they'd say, well, what is about our industry, the music industry? What's your place in the music industry? Or how's the future? And I used to say that I don't see myself as being part of an industry, and I don't even see myself as being part of a business. But I didn't think music was a product, but music is a human need. And music is something that we just that nourishes us. And when we don't have it, we're much the worse for it. And then, of course, the world being what it is, we can't count on some, it can't be like some Buddhist monks and figure people will come around and bring us food. It's more structured than that. We have to sell it. We have to distribute it. But ultimately, what we're doing is something that's extraneous. It's not like somebody that's, how can I put that? It's the first thing is we have to nourish, we have to touch our fellow human beings, and that's our role. And then if we're doing that, then we figure out how do we make a living. We don't start by thinking how am I going to make a living, and then say, well, maybe I'll do a little nourishing along the way. No, that's no good. So that would be my thought. And there's something about it, I have a good friend who teaches trumpet. He's a wonderful trumpet player, Chris Gecker. He's played first trumpet with the New York Philharmonic. He's played with the Duke Ellington Band. He has a huge resume and a wonderful musician. He knows a ton of music. So he teaches trumpet, mostly classical, well, not always, all sorts of trumpet at the University of Maryland. His class is like loaded. He's filled to the brim, and they're working like hell. And, he even said to me, don't even know what they're working for. Right now, there are no orchestras playing. Who knows what's going to happen? But it doesn't matter. These guys are doing it, and they can't help it. It's what drives them on, and it's what drives, I hope, all of us on. And in spite of all the obstacles, it just means we have to just press on more. And when we do that, unexpected and great ways, I think, emerge, that we can find a way to make a living, that we can find a way to reach people and have some kind of financial interchange, but that our satisfaction is not for, well, okay, I was once in the presence of a major rock star, and who I did not know well at the time, but I happened to be there at his house, and he had an SSL mixing board, a huge SSL mixing board. And we were there with a couple of other people I'd been invited. A couple of people were there, and a filmmaker said, well, how much do you use this now? This was not that long ago. And he said, well, once we made all our records on it, now it's in the computer. It's, we put coffee on it and so on. And he says, well, you must have a lot of feeling about that. You made all your hit records on that? Yes, we made it all on that record. You must have a lot of feeling for that. And he says, yes, I made a lot of money off of that board. And I thought, oh, well, okay, it just says a lot. It just says a lot. And I was just, oh, my heart is so connected. No, I made a lot of money with that board. Well, okay, there are people who approach that, and sometimes they say that, but actually in their secret life, they're very soulful. But I know at the end, what keeps us going, when we look back to play Coltrane's music, or to play Bach's music, or play Stravinsky's music, we don't say, oh, he's great, look how much money he made.
Yeah, man.
Come up. We don't say what a success he was. No, he was a success. And I will quote something wonderful that Wayne Shorter said to me when we were talking once, talking about some of these subjects. And Wayne, I think, is someone who managed to follow his own path and do well. Not like some people, but to do very well. And he said, we were talking, and he said, to me, a platinum record is a record that makes the listener feel like platinum. Right? Okay, that's right. That's right. And when you're around people like that, you feel it. And it's funny because when I make records, mostly I try to work mostly a lot. Let's say a lot. By now, there are a lot of people I've done before. We have a certain community, a certain cadre. But you're adding people, and sometimes it's a special project or it's a slightly different style. And I can say, when I call people for an album project or to play on a song, I would say that virtually none of they've been recommended. They're people I know are good people. They never bring up the money first. We talk about what the music is going to be. We talk about what he's going to be expected to do, et cetera, et cetera. Every so often, I'll get on the phone and we'll barely be talking. Someone I don't know, and they say, well, how much does it pay? I say, okay, I've got to get off this call as fast as I can. Not that it doesn't matter. Not that you don't have to be paid, but that doesn't drive the discussion. That doesn't drive the discussion. And it's a funny thing because it's in everybody's mind. Everybody knows if you didn't pay the people, they'd be upset. But first we have to make a different connection. we have to make a connection like you make with friends, like you make with a woman that, or with a, you know, a companion that you believe in. It's not later, oh, I'm marrying a rich man, isn't that great? No, that's not great. I mean, yeah, that maybe that's a plus, maybe, but that's not why you're, that's we don't lead with that, you know. So that would, I'd say that's like my opening salvo on that subject.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So I want to ask you something I never really got to ask you. Um, Most of the producers in the world come from two really backgrounds. They're either the guy at the label that arranges the session, make sure that there's coffee, there's food, the studio is booked, there's rehearsal space, there's a transcriber, or it's a musician. Um, he plays a little guitar, but you realize that's not for them. Uh, your background is, I mean, you conducted the greatest symphonies orchestras of today. You conducted Jazz at Lincoln Center. I'm not going to drop any names because it's just like when someone has that intimate understanding of holding those notes with the baton. What does that bring to a session? What does that?
Well, I can speak for myself, and that I never felt myself as a quote unquote record producer. I do produce records. I do it quite a bit, but I don't think of myself as a record producer. Don't think of myself as a conductor either, although I've conducted quite a bit, done other things. But it's all a reflection of being a musician. And I think what struck me from the beginning is that for me, an album is so much like an orchestra. I mean, it's so much like conducting an orchestra with some some fantastic pluses. One, and the biggest one is, well, let's just say the first thing was, we'll talk about what's similar. It's just like the orchestra's playing, and then I say, oh, you know, violas, bring a little more out. Let's bring a little more out. And now you say, oh, let's just lift the fader on the viola there a little bit. We can do it, but we're doing the same thing. And the one thing about mixing is that you have the, with the orchestra, hey, you have the beauty of all those live people right on the spot, and they bring something there, and that is great. There's nothing. It's not like one is better than the other. But one thing about mixing is, you know, you can't tell that esteemed, you could tell that esteemed French horn solo French horn player once, I'll play that softer. Maybe a second time you could say it might be good. Around the third time, you're pressing it. He doesn't want to be told that much what to do. But if you've got a bunch of faders there, let's give him more. Let's do less. Let's do that. Let's EQ a little. So I felt like it's just like conducting, only I've got a different relationship to the sounds. It's much more infinite. I can keep working and working and working. There's a great comment that Schoenberg made. It was around the time of his first chamber symphony, which if any of you, whether classical musician or not, Schoenberg's first chamber symphony, Opus 9, is an astonishing, unbelievable work, and just thrilling piece of music. And he was talking about how many rehearsals he needed, and someone in the course of it, he was talking to a younger conductor who said something to the effect of, well, people say, you know, if you have that many rehearsals, of course it'll be good. He says, no, it's hard to have something to say after that many rehearsals. When you have that many rehearsals, it's hard to have something to say. And you have to really know what, you have to really be striving for something. And that impacted me a lot when I read it. And so it's so much the same. In the recording studio, it's not that much different from the orchestra. It's the form, the structure is different. You know, you've got, you rarely have a session with that many people unless it's an orchestral recording, but you're working together to make something sound good. So to me, it's like two versions of the same thing. And if I was just doing particularly if I was doing mixing or post-production exclusively, I would feel I miss those people. But if everything I did, it was a great liberation for me when the Pro Tools got developed enough that we could start to work on records at home. And I remember making some of the records that did very well musically, that just did great, that really brought things across. But I remember begging for more time to come into the studio to fix things, pleading with the record company, please, da da da, and they're convincing them I need it, et cetera, et cetera. Now I wake up at 2 in the morning, walk over to the thing, okay, let's work on this a while. It's very refreshing. That's not to say that there aren't times when having another person in the room is so important, and you can't do it all yourself. So all these things are complicated. I work with an engineer all the time, Dave Darlington, and over the years, we've done so much together, and over the years, our working method has constantly changed because the technology has changed so many times and our skills have evolved, each of us. But very often now I will work, he may set up the basic mix, just kind of get the wiring right and some basic things. Then I'll take it at home and I'll work. Then I bring it back to him and it goes to another level. A, because he has a freshness of ear that I maybe am missing, but also he's got the expertise of mixing records. He's mixing 100 records a year. I'm mixing 8, 5, 10, 3. And so I have the benefit of just making this thing, just taking it to the end of the earth. He's got the advantage of all that experience and all that knowledge of, oh, we can get rid of that little noise. Don't worry about that. Oh, I know a way we can get, oh, wow, that was great. That was brilliant. And so all of this, and in this computer era now, this digital era, that mixing the humanity and the solitude is like one of the great joys of our era.
So two questions about what you just said. The first is a completely naive one. Not having anywhere near the kind of studio time behind me as you do. Can things really be saved in the, like, we'll fix it in the mix? That mantra, is that even possible?
Well, it's a great question. The basic thing I'd say is there's nothing more important than what happens in the recording. If it's not right in the recording, I mean, if the playing is not right, you cannot fix. What is the case though is maybe I think of a case where I was in a situation a little bit pressed for time, and a vocalist I didn't know, a studio I didn't know very well, singing a lead vocal on one song, and later I got it back in this crackling, there's some distortion. In the excitement of the moment, I didn't hear it, the engineer didn't notice it. Now I hear this distortion. Now my heart's broken. I can't get these people back again. We're on a tight schedule. That's when I called Dave Darlington. He says, yeah, I can get rid of that crackling. And in that respect, there can be noises. Sometimes there are noises that detract, that aren't helping. They're not the sounds of music. They're just sounds. And with expertise, you can get rid of them. And so but if the basic music is not right, you can't. No, then you can't.
Meaning, if the drummer didn't go all in, there's no amount of fader that will give you that feeling.
You can make it better, but you can't. It's not a substitute for when that drummer went all in. It's not the same. It's not the same. But I remember the first time I was working on a guitar overdub with Boys Choir of Harlem. A guy I didn't know. Again, it's someone he'd been recommended. It was with Dave Darlington actually in his studio. He's playing a guitar overdub, electric guitar, pick guitar overdub. I say, it's good. You're rushing a little. And he says, well, you can push it back. You can take it back, pull it back in Pro Tools. I thought, oh God, that was the first time. Pro Tools was still an early-ish era, but Pro Tools was about, I said, no, that's a terrible, terrible way. On the other hand, if there's a phenomenal take, only there's one spot where it just splatters in a way that's just not attractive, we can find another note for that. So in that sense, yes, you can save it. In other words, guy plays great and one note just cracks. It's not human. It's just mars it for a record, not live, but just mars it. Okay, so we get another take, we get another note, we drop it in, and in that sense, we did fix it in the mix. But the guy had to play great in the studio. We can't make him play great.
So I'm sure this is not a good example of this guy in the studio, because I'm sure there are many projects where some of the musicians are inherent to the leader or to the star, or some of it is this, or it's a chamber ensemble. You cannot really switch the oboe, or so I'm not gonna relate to any of this. What I'm asking is, it doesn't matter if someone is 20, 22 or legend. What makes you decide which artist to produce, which artist?
That's a great question. Well, pretty much as a rule, really, as an unbelievable rule, once or twice, once I can think of, once in my life, I was fairly new to this. I was fairly new to New York, and there was a group that wanted me to produce them, and they were quite gifted and quite good, but I didn't really feel them. But I felt, no, you can't start turning down work. You just got to New York. You can't start turning down work. It did not turn out so well, and I left for another project. But I would say I have to feel inspired by the person's music. If I if I don't feel inspired by that person, the relationship is too close. It's too intimate. You can't. And so, and for me, now other people are different, and I don't think this is the only way to work. And nobody, it has to suit you. It has to suit the musicians. And I'm sure there are times that people take projects that they thought, I'm not really inspired, but let the hell, we have to keep working, and great things happened. And I didn't think it would, but it was. And so I'm not saying that this is the only way to work, but for me, I have to feel a close connection to the person, a close connection to his music, her music, before we start. If I don't have that, it can't work. And then we have to have a certain comfort between, that they have there's a certain warmth between us. Those, I'd say, like belief in the music and that warmth between us. Those would be the defining qualities.
So I go back. I'm going studio again. I go back to Schoenberg's comment.
Right.
From your for your thing, do you want things to be on the tip of over prepared, going the band going in, or what's the fine line between over prepared to under prepared in a so does being is being under prepared leads to more spontaneity in the studio? Is being over prepared? I mean,
Okay.
what's
Well, I mean, this is one of these ones, and anything I say is, one person out of hundreds of thousands in this field, and I don't want to act like not that anyone thinks so anyway, but I don't even think that what I'm saying is right, is the word, or something like that. But I'd put it this way. Yes. Well, um, how can I say this? Miles Davis was famous for not rehearsing and not wanting the people to practice at home. That's what you do on the bandstand. You play, you create it on the bandstand, and so on. And it obviously worked. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I think Miles Davis, another friend of mine, Henry Martin, wonderful composer, very bright guy, wrote a book on Charlie Parker that's very interesting. And he played trumpet as well as piano. And he and his friends had a band when he was in high school. And he said, how come when we crack notes, it just sounded like we cracked a note. When Miles Davis cracks a note, it's so heartbreaking. So I think that you have to be. I'm speaking for myself. You have to be cautious about taking too much of the model from great people. There are people who played when they were high, people who all the above. And yes, Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter, probably, yeah, they could just come in and something will happen. And if they play too long, they'll lose something. Ross Russell, Ross Russell?
Yeah, I
Um,
know the name.
Ross Russell was the owner of um, Dial Records on the West Coast, and he recorded Charlie Parker while Charlie Parker was out there. A lot of the early sessions. He also recorded Parr talking a lot of classical music. He's a great guy, and he said that when they recorded Charlie Parker stuff, of course they didn't rehearse. They came in with the music and they played. Charlie Parker came in with these new songs, and they would record it, and the guys would kind of stumble, and they'd play it a couple of times. The guys would learn the head, and they'd play it. They said by the time the guys could do a decent job, Charlie Parker's stuff was left way behind. Now in today's world, we might try to grab Charlie Parker's first solo and put it in with a later head or something, but that's not an option. I would say this, in my experience, just mine, it's just me, the music I do, etc. I've never felt a record was over prepared in the studio. Never. I never felt, oh, we're stale now. I've never felt that. I'm sure some people have. And I've never felt, wow, he didn't know what he was doing. Well, sometimes someone doesn't know what they're doing and they play great, but it's usually on a foundation where a lot of other people do know what they're doing very much. Um, my sense is better preparation, makes a better album. That's what I feel. And there's a great, My Life in Court, My Life in Court, Louis Nizer. We have a lot of quotes. My Life in Court. It's an old book. It's a